All right, Nuggets fans, welcome into Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports and FanDuel. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn, at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network. I am here. I am ready to discuss the Denver Nuggets on a Saturday morning, recording this on Friday night, going to air on Saturday morning. And my first time kind of doing a Saturday show as we, again, kind of kick back into gear for the NBA season. Looking at the schedule here, games start up on October 21st. It is September 12th when I record this, September 13th when you see it or watch it or listen to it. Things are moving. Things are moving. We are just over a month away before the NBA season kicks off. And it feels like we're still in the dead of the offseason, but they're starting to coalesce a little bit. Going to be interesting. The only Nuggets news that we've had really recently is that the Grand Rapids Gold traded for Moses Brown, who's a 7'2" center who is probably going to play in the G League, but I think the Nuggets signed him to a training camp contract. We will see what happens if that was an Exhibit 10 kind of deal or a training camp deal. It's probably just going to get him a little bit of a bonus or something, but he will be in Nuggets training camp with the possibility of winning the 15th man spot. We'll talk about that if and when it kind of comes to pass. I'm sure that once October hits, there's going to be plenty of content, and we can talk about some of those guys like Kessler Edwards and Moses Brown and some of the other guys that have also signed some deals. So we'll get into it all, but I'm, for this episode, going to mirror the last episode that released on Thursday. There were a couple of folks not so happy that I used some provocative language in my thumbnails and was trying to get people to click on the video and that I would clickbait people. Yes, that is what I'm trying to do. I am trying to get people to click on the videos, but I'm also trying to provide good, honest content. And so behind a shocking, possible surprise thumbnail was hey, we're going to see here's some 5 different surprises that the Nuggets could have that would make the season a positive or turn it into a positive direction, kind of unexpectedly positive direction. Now we're going to go the other direction. We're going to talk about the negative direction in counter to that. And I think that this is a valuable exercise, not because I hate everyone, but I do. More so because I think that it's important to understand the parameters with which you're working with and also the stakes we're working with, knowing that this is a very important season for the Nuggets and there are pitfalls along the way that, while I do think that Denver is in line to compete for a championship and has a really good chance to do so, there's a possibility that it doesn't happen. So let's talk about why that would happen, how it could happen, and how Denver could work against that. So without further ado, I wanted to start this off by talk about, baseline expectations. As we mentioned before in the last episode, I have it as a Western Conference Finals appearance. I went through it before, but I talked about it through the premise of the FanDuel odds that Denver has the second best odds to get out of the Western Conference. I do think that because of their ability to compete with the OKC Thunder last year, though that series was probably a little bit closer than it should have been in retrospect, I do think that Denver is very well positioned at this point to continue competing with everybody. They have flaws, but they also have answers to a lot of the questions that other teams can pose to them, like the Houston Rockets or the LA Lakers or other teams that might pop into the conversation. Minnesota, I think Denver's better positioned to handle Minnesota this year than they were the previous season. Things like that. So we'll kind of go through that. And that's, like I said in the last episode, Western Conference Finals is the baseline. It's what I think Nuggets fans should have as par for the course this year, among other monikers that you could go into. Obviously, you should be shooting for the moon. You should be trying to get into the finals, win a championship, things like that. But if Denver doesn't get to the Western Conference Finals, I think the season will probably be a failure. Given what they traded, given they traded their only tradable first-round pick in order to acquire Cam Johnson to free up the salary cap space, the flexibility in order to make other moves on the fringes, adding guys like Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway, Jonas Valanciunas, things like that. I think that Denver is in a good position to compete there, but if they don't get to the Western Conference Finals, it should be considered a fail. Now, there would be reasons why that doesn't happen, and we'll talk about them now. Would have to change what would have to change from, like, the baseline expectation of what I talked about, where you kinda know what you're getting for most of these guys, what a 50th percentile, 55th percentile outcome would look like, basically average. You know that Jamal Murray is gonna go for 21 and 6, he'll be slightly better in the playoffs. You know that Jokic is gonna be dominant, he'll be really dominant in both the regular season and the playoffs. You know that Aaron Gordon's a gamer, that Christian Brown's probably gonna struggle from 3 in the playoffs, that Cam Johnson, at least going to be solid, and you don't know about the playoffs yet. Things like that. What's going to differ from current expectations for the Nuggets that makes it so they fail? And like I said, I'm not trying to do this because I hate everyone. I'm trying to do this because it's important to understand what you're looking at before you're actually in the moment. So, the first pitfall, Nikola Jokic is less than full strength heading into the playoffs. This is obviously a big deal. Fortunately, Denver has not had to worry about this that often before. He has been an Iron Man. He has been very consistent with everything. I do think, and I talked about this before, I do think he looks a little big in terms of his actual physical fitness and his ability to keep up with smaller players on the perimeter, things like that. But he's still the smartest player in the world. He's still a very capable player, even when things aren't going perfectly. And his touch is so unbelievable that he can make up the difference on the offensive end. But he's also been super healthy, and people just don't stay that, it's getting to the point where it's kind of lucky. What if Denver gets unlucky? What if Denver gets to a point where instead of 72 games, he plays 62? Like, how does that affect the win-loss column? Like, can Denver survive 20 games absence for Nikola Jokic? If it's at the wrong time, do they go 7-13 if he breaks a wrist or something? Like, knock on wood, obviously, as I knock on the wood as loudly as I can so that you can hear it. But it would be horrible if that were to happen, but it's at least a possibility that it does. And you should build in the idea that Denver's not going to get perfectly lucky with Jokic every single time. So the times that they do, the times that he's healthy, you got to capitalize on it. You just do. Number two, injuries hit the other Nuggets because the Nuggets closers, and what I mean by closers is basically the top 6 or 7 in their rotation. Bruce Brown, maybe Peyton Watson, Tim Hardaway Jr., who knows? Injuries hit those Nuggets guys, the guys that you would expect to play big minutes in the playoffs, because they are overworked or, again, just unlucky. Like, Denver got unlucky in these last playoffs. Michael Porter hurt his shoulder at the very beginning, and it really impacted him. I'm not sure he would have been much better with a healthy shoulder, but it would have been nice to see it. Aaron Gordon, hurt his hamstring pretty significantly at grade 2 hamstring strain, and he played through it in game 7. It was an Iron Man performance. He was obviously bothered. Russell Westbrook broke bones in his hand, or tore ligaments in his hand, my mistake. And that was obviously problematic for his shooting, especially later in the playoffs. So Denver needs to get luckier than they were last year. They got pretty unlucky in large part because those guys had to play a lot. Now, you don't necessarily, and also Jamal Murray often deals with injuries himself and did so in 2024. You can't just sit here and say, and I'm not going to sit here and say that it's all because of heavy minutes load. Some of it is luck. Some of it is stuff that you cannot predict, even if you play a lot of minutes. But if you put yourself into a position where those minutes don't happen, then it's less likely, just from a time perspective, to actually happen in that moment, because you're playing a smaller percentage of minutes overall. So I hope that Denver can manage that as best as they can. We will see. Number 3, and this is where we start to get into major things and not just hypothetical injuries. What if the defense just doesn't get better? What if people start to get kind of mad and frustrated about the defense? Where last year it was a lot of, I don't know, guess we're not defending, guess we're not guarding. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. Oh, we picked it up in the playoffs a little bit. We tried and we did better. They still weren't good defensively in the playoffs, and both the Clippers and the Thunder were able to score on them and generate open shots on a pretty consistent basis. Jokic not being a perimeter switch guy really limits Denver from a rotational standpoint. They have to give him a lot of help at the rim in some cases due to rim protection concerns. And then you're closing out and you're behind the rotations, and the Nuggets just left a lot of guys open as a result. What if that's just the norm? What if that's something that because Denver, like, okay, who did they add? Well, they lost Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric and Flacco Chanchar and Michael Porter, and they gained Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway Jr., Jonas Valanciunas. Is it that much better? Like, is it? I don't know. I don't think so. So it's going to be interesting. I think the defense will get better naturally because everybody's going to have a different perspective heading into this year. It does feel like the team is a little closer, but don't sit there and act like there's not a world where Denver's defense is just average or pretty close to where it was last year. And even when they try hard, they're not able to do everything that they need to do to be a championship level defense. There's at least a world where that's true. Number 4, what if Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway, and Jonas Valanciunas, what if they were cheap gets for a reason? What if the reason that they were cheap additions on the free agent and trade market was because nobody wanted them? Because they weren't going to be good this year? I don't think that's what's going to happen. I really do think that because those guys are playing in reduced minutes situations now, that they will be optimized. And if David Adelman can put things together, then I do think that there's a good way for all 3 of those guys to really positively impact the Nuggets bench. But what if they don't? What if there's a reason why they came cheap? And what if Denver gets 32% from 3 for Bruce Brown and like subpar finishing at the rim, subpar defense? What if Tim Hardaway is just a cone on the defensive end and he isn't shooting that efficiently? What if Jonas Valanciunas is struggling to finish around the rim and move his feet on defense? We've seen that. Dario Saric, like, that was pretty clear, and they're in similar stages of their career. I think the Valanciunas is obviously a better player, but it's possible that they really struggle. Like, these are possible pitfalls. And then last one. What if the money and contracts become an issue for Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, Zeke Naji, and Julian Strawther? All for different reasons. Christian Brown, he's looking at the restricted free agency market, and Peyton Watson, same thing. Christian's expecting starter $20 to $25 million money, basically in line with what Josh Giddey got. He's looking for that in an extension. He doesn't get that. The team's trying to shortchange him. And then he's playing for a contract and playing a little bit more selfishly and not necessarily doing the right things. Peyton Watson, same thing. What if he expects starter caliber money? What if he's expecting double digits? And I don't think that it's crazy for him to expect that. What if the Nuggets are unwilling to give that deal? And for both Christian Brown and Peyton Watson, they're playing for money and playing for their livelihood next time. And the team actually takes a second place in the pecking order. I don't expect that to happen with either of those guys, but there's at least a world where it does. Zeke Naji, for a different reason, the Nuggets they play him and they play him and they play him and they try to get him to a place where he's a tradable contract for them. And what if he just never is? What if he's always in a situation where the Nuggets just have his contract for the next 3 years on the books, nothing they can do about it? And he's not a guy that they can trust in the playoffs. He's going into his 6th season. That is he's the 3rd longest tenured Nugget. That's an actual stat. So it'll be interesting to see how that changes and what Denver's priorities become, especially when it comes to Deron Holmes, for example. And then Julian Strawther, he's watching all the restricted stuff and he's wondering, okay, How much am I going to actually play? What if he averages 12 minutes a game? What if he gets 5 shots a game? It's going to be really tough to earn a bunch of money from that spot in the rotation, from that spot in the pecking order. So, what if it becomes an issue? What if he's not doing the right things to get on the court because he's a little bit worried about getting those numbers up and getting those shots up to try to show teams that he can really be and fill that role for somebody else? There's at least a world where it happens. So, all of these things, I'm not sitting here and trying to be a doomer. What I'm trying to do is outline the idea that things may not be all sunshine and rainbows, and here are the reasons why it could happen. Uh, there's also a possibility that it's a new team and everybody expects the chemistry to get better. It just might not. Like, it might be a different situation. People might still be frustrated if things don't go their way. So, all of this to say, there is a possibility that things don't work out perfectly. When we come back, I'm going to talk about the actual worst case scenario, what that looks like for Denver, and how the Nuggets can avoid that possibility. We'll be right back here on Pickaxe and Roll. All right, we are back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much for tuning into the show, folks. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Would really, really appreciate it. I'm going to have Jeff Morton on the show here relatively soon. I want to hear some pop culture topics in the comments that you guys would be interested in hearing us discuss. I've got some thoughts. I've got some things. Usually we go over movies, we go over shows that we've been watching, things like that. I've been getting into books and audiobooks. I've been doing some D&D prep for my campaign that I really want to run with my friends. Uh, any pop culture things that you guys think, other than Nugget stuff, that you'd like for us to talk about and just have a glass of wine over or something, then let us know. Let me know in the comments down below. Okay, let's get into this. What is the actual worst case scenario for the Nuggets? Well, according to FanDuel, Denver is minus 3,000 to make the playoffs. They have implied odds of basically 90.2% to make the playoffs because they have a plus 920 odds to miss the playoffs. So 90.2% chance that they miss or that they make the playoffs, 9.8% chance that they miss the playoffs. That seems pretty fair. That's when we're talking about outcomes. That's like your maybe 10th or 5th percentile outcome, somewhere around there, where Denver, yeah, it's probably very unlikely to happen. But if it does, then here's how it would possibly play out. Here's what I wrote down. I think that Denver, it would be a really big stretch for them to actually miss the playoffs. I don't think that that would happen. Laid out in plain terms, here's what I think is like a 10th to 20th percentile outcome. What I mean is, like, this is a really subpar outcome for Denver. It's not zero, because like zero again is Nikola Jokic sustaining a major injury, multiple guys sustaining major injuries, Denver being in the lottery, things like that. That's a possibility for everybody, but it's the nightmare scenario that you don't really discuss because it's not reasonable to discuss that. But this is reasonable. This is like within the realm. 10th to 20th percentile outcome is about 47 and 35 for Denver. It's only three wins fewer than Denver had before. Maybe it's like 46 and 36. Maybe they get unlucky in some cases. But even then, like, Denver has so much talent and so much depth, it would be very difficult for them to go much lower than this. I think 47 to 35 is about play-in tourney bound, given the deep Western Conference that you're facing. Maybe they're the 7 seed, the 8 seed, maybe a 9 seed, but most likely kind of 7th or 8th. Jokic misses a chunk of games because he gets less lucky than he's been over the course of the first 10 years of his career. Instead of the possible 10 games he misses 20. He, like I talked about, it's a ligament thing. It's a broken bone. It's what, like, things that are just fluke things that happen to people. He plays 62 games instead of 72, misses 20. Valanciunas in his place doesn't really step up. maybe he gets injured playing a heavier role than was really expecting to. He doesn't really step up as a starter, and that pressure it now is applied to the other starters, and they get tired. They are doing their best. Jamal Murray's averaging 20 shots a game. Cam Johnson is back to his Brooklyn days, trying to figure out, okay, how do I create offense for these guys? What is it going to look like? Aaron Gordon's trying to step up. He's averaging like 18, 8 and 5, but the Nuggets are just not winning. And injuries occur. Injuries occur due to overwork, due to poor luck. Defense falls apart without the elite rebounding that you get from Jokic. And especially if you have Valanciunas starting, what does it look like with the second unit? There's a lot of these things. You get some targets in the rotation, talking about Cam Johnson, Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway, Jonas Valanciunas. You add in Jokic and Murray in there. The Nuggets don't have a lot of great defenders on their team. There's going to be a lot of targets. So unless everybody's fully locked in and ready to go, there's going to be opportunities for Denver to give up 120, 130 points pretty consistently. And then the defense, like I said, falls apart. And Denver, yes, they get through the play-in tourney because they'll have Jokic back for that. They'll have Murray back for that. They'll have most of their guys, and like they'll be okay. But then what happens when you get out of the play-in tournament? You play a 1 seed or a 2 seed. And Denver loses in that matchup because, okay, OKC, the Lakers, the Rockets, whoever it is that they face, let's say they just don't get through that. Okay. Now you're first round out. Now, the Nuggets, according to FanDuel, are a plus 490 odds to be in the play-in tournaments. They are it's that in-between area, that 7 to 10 section in the playoffs, in the final standings. Denver's plus 490. That's a pretty low number in the West. It's not the lowest. That would be OKC and Utah on both ends of the spectrum are very, very unlikely to make the play-in tournament. But Denver is a little bit more likely than a team like OKC because they don't have as much depth, even though they've improved it. And there's at least some shakiness that if Jokic were to miss some time, then what does the rest of the team do? What do they look like? It'll be horrible. Now, what's the fallout in a situation like that? Well, depending on his trade market, the Nuggets probably trade Jamal Murray if they lose in the first round of the playoffs. Like they try to trade him, they try to give themselves some flexibility. They're not about to pay significant tax. They're probably looking to go star hunting to try to keep Jokic around, to try to get him to sign that next 4-year max deal. He's already rejected the 3-year max that the Nuggets could offer. I don't think anybody really expected him to sign that one, but it would be nice for Denver if he had. Now, if Jokic is staring in the face at a team that just lost in the first round of the playoffs, Luka and the Lakers, they look like they're having fun. That would be pretty interesting if he decided, I just want to take LeBron's salary because LeBron's in the final year of his deal. And then Jokic has some questions about his own future because he starts looking around at some other situations. Obviously, that is the worst situation. It's a horrible outcome for the Nuggets if that were to happen. It's not completely born out of insanity. This isn't doomerism. This is something that just happened to the Mavericks, for example. They went to the NBA Finals in 2024 and then traded Luka Doncic 7 months later. Like literally 7 months later. Things can really pivot if the situation gets ugly. I don't expect this to happen. Obviously, this is not something that you would expect to take place. So how can the Nuggets avoid it? How can they avoid this becoming their reality? Well, what were the things that were most important in that scenario that I laid out? Jokic staying healthy. Don't play 62 games. Play 72. Play 75. Try to play fewer minutes. Don't play 36, 37 minutes. Play 32. Play 33. Play about 75 games at 32 to 33 minutes per game. That is basically in line with what he's done for his entire career. If that's what happens, fantastic. Then the team helps him out on both ends of the floor. It's not just the offensive end, it's not just the defensive end, it's both. Murray steps up and has a pretty good offensive year. Cam Johnson takes off some of the pressure on that side of the floor. Jonas Valanciunas is scoring on the second unit, and the Nuggets are not dry when it comes to non-Jokic offense. Like they need to find some sort of outlet. They need to find some sort of opportunity for that to really take off. And Valanciunas has a great option for that. Denver's commitment to defense is pretty good. Pretty good, and they get to it early on. This is not something where they need to wait until game 45 in order to figure out. This is a game 1, game 10, game 15 kind of thing where they're like, okay, if we're going to win, got to really play some defense, got to really guard. And then they're suddenly 12th in defense, 15th in defense, as opposed to 21st like last year. And then you figure out which of those veterans can really help you. Right now, it kind of feels like a Russian roulette for Bruce Brown, Tim Hardaway, Jonas Valanciunas, any of the other guys that they decide to bring in off the bench, some of the young guys especially. Use the beginning of the season to figure out who can play, figure out different combinations that you like, and then really start to lock in on those lineups and really start to get some bonuses from the bench, from those different units. That would be the best case scenario for Denver. And it's not that hard to foresee them doing that. And then the last thing that I've got, just pay your players. This one is not gonna sit well with a lot of people. Christian Brown and Peyton Watson are up for a contract. Next year will be Julian Strawther that's up for a contract. Most of the time when the Nuggets have guys that are up for contracts, they pay them. If they don't pay them, there's a very significant reason as to why. And usually if it kind of gets to it, they still pay them because they like to retain their talent if they can, especially for the young players or the developmental players, the guys that they think are a part of their future. They don't let those guys go that often. So pay your guys. If you think that Christian Brown's your shooting guard of the future, pay him. Like, what's the rush? Why are you waiting? There's no reason. You don't want to have that hanging over your head, hanging over his head, hanging over the locker room's head if there's an opportunity to get it done. I always think, that putting your team in a position where they're not thinking about their contracts, they're not thinking about money, or there's just one guy. Like, if there's one guy and you understand the deal, it's a vet minimum for Bruce Brown. He thinks that he could get back out on the market if he plays really well, plays really hard, fits his role. So be it. Like, he showed it and he got paid. And that was the thing. It's different with the young guys, different with the guys that have never seen a dollar, that are still trying to, and when I say a dollar, what I mean is like that second contract that really starts to set you up. For Christian, that's a 4-year, $80 to $100 million deal. For Peyton Watson, that's probably a 3-year, $30 million deal. It's a 4-year, $40 million deal. You don't want those guys thinking about that all the time. You don't want that to be in their heads all the time. That's just not that's not how I would go about it if I could help it. Be willing to go into the second apron. Like, I understand that there are some flexibility concerns if you do, but if you believe in this team, I could understand not believing in last year's team. I didn't believe in last year's team. But if you think that there's a possibility that this team wins a championship, you give them every opportunity to do so. And that means keeping the headspace clear. That means removing distractions. That means buying into the system. It means really going to war and really going to battle for your guys. And the best way to do that is the way that I outlined it. Stay healthy, trust your teammates, really buy into defense, and commit to playing everybody as much as you can until you have to start making tough choices later in the season. David Adelman's got a really tough task. It's not easy. This is going to be a very interesting year. I'm very curious to see how he handles it. There are a lot of possible pitfalls. There are a lot of possible points that I will be worried about, that I'll be thinking about. Not extensively, but like, just know that if some of these things happen, you know where you heard it from. But like, in general, if the Nuggets can get out of the regular season 55 to 58 wins, healthy, top 3 seed, doing everything that they need to do, working on their game, working on their rotations, they'll have a great shot at winning a title. If that gets distracted during the regular season and they fall below a top 3 seed, just know that they can make the finals. Teams have proven that. I just don't think it's super likely. I think Denver, if they are going to win a championship, they got to take the regular season seriously. They have to go about it the right way. They've got to win some games. If they don't, then we'll see how it goes. Okay. That is going to do it, folks, for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends here at Mile High Sports and FanDuel. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the way out. Would really, really appreciate it. I will talk to you guys next week.